Hello and welcome. My guest tonight for the Leadership Series is Karen Diver. Many of you may have heard of her. You will enjoy getting to meet her. She is the chairwoman of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. She is a woman who, she just told me, has served on 6 boards throughout her career, including the Blandon Board, the Women's Foundation of Minnesota, where she was chair for 10 years. She is currently the chair of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe.
The vice chair.
The vice chair, Thank you. She is also a woman who was, for 11 years, the executive director of the YWCA in Duluth. And when I read about your early days, Karen, I want to ask you a lot of specific questions, but I kind of got a map in my mind of arrows starting in Minnesota, going to Ohio, back to Minnesota, out to Boston, where she got her master's at Harvard, and then back to Minnesota. So we'll have you explain your travels. But welcome to the show, and you certainly deserve to be on the Leadership Series.
Thank you, that's very kind.
You've been a wonderful leader. Tell us a bit about your early days, because you grew up, as I said, in Minnesota.
Actually, I wasn't born in Minnesota. My parents were.
Oh, okay.
And they were both members of the Fond du Lac Band, and they were born and raised on the reservation. But there was a federal program back in the day that encouraged Native Americans to move into major urban areas. It was called the Federal Indian Relocation Program. And back in those days, it was difficult for young families, Indian families, to get employment. So my dad took a chance and moved to Cleveland, Ohio, because he just wanted to be able to provide for his family. So I and my 3 siblings were born. My sister was born in Minnesota, and the rest of us were born in Cleveland, Ohio. But then when I grew up and wanted to go to school and be able to access scholarship funds, they said I had to be in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. So in 1983, I moved to Duluth in order to attend the University of Minnesota at Duluth.
And had your folks encouraged you to go back to get your degree? Had they been part of that decision? Because that's a big thing, to move back to another state.
You know, my parents said a lot about what they valued through their investment, and my dad was the first one in his family to graduate from high school. Mm. And in Cleveland, they put all 4 of their children through 12 years of private school. So I knew from that investment that the value they placed was on education, and we heard a lot growing up that you need that to be self-determined and make your own choices. What complicated things a bit for me is I was a young mother, a teen mother. So I had extra incentive to further my education and try to get on my feet. So while they weren't happy with me moving away, and I wasn't happy with it because I was leaving a support system, I certainly knew that the education was primary in terms of being able to take care of myself and my young daughter. So when I moved to Minnesota, she was 3 and I was 18, and you know, but we did it, and you know, it's one foot in front of the other, and I graduated in 1987 with an undergraduate degree in economics, and I became the first one in my family to graduate from college.
And weren't you the first American Indian woman to graduate with an economics major?
Yeah, the University of Minnesota Duluth tells me that I was the first Native female to graduate from the business school there at UMD. Okay. So.
And with your daughter, her name is Rochelle.
Yeah.
Did you have to work while you were going to school? And
I did the first year in order to help pay for childcare, because I wasn't eligible for some support. But then as my school plans went on and I became a junior and I had 2 years of education left, then, you know, the different programs that I needed to use in order to finish, I became fully eligible. And so, you know, I'm grateful to this day for the assistance that helped my family get on its feet.
We always talk on our leadership series about mentors. And I read that your mother was specifically a mentor. Who were some of the others, and why your mother?
My mother, just for her tenacity. And, she came from a different era. She was, a housewife up until my youngest brother was nearly done with high school. But she was the unconditional love, the knowing that your back is covered no matter what. My mother persevered in her own way, in her own life, to make a good life for her family, and certainly for both my father, who was a boarding school kid. He got sent away when he was 6 to Wahpeton, North Dakota, and removed from his family by a different government program. My mother, from a family of 9, and just growing up in hardship, they were both so determined to have a different life for their children, and it would have been an awfully wasted gift not to take advantage of the opportunities they gave us. So, just for her grit, I think my mother is certainly a role model. But, much like in a spouse, you never find what you need all in one person, right?
Right.
That's why you have friends and companions. So, I've had so many through the years that I've learned different things from. Nancy Groover, the founder of New Moon Magazine for Girls, is a good friend still to this day.
Which is a Duluth publication.
Was a Duluth publication, yeah,
publication.
And an advertising-free publication for young girls. And certainly her mantra of growing strong girls, grow strong women, resonated with me, being a young woman and raising a daughter as well. And through the years, men as well. I've had lawyers who were friends who taught me things, and philanthropists, who taught me about the importance of volunteering and giving back. And all of those relationships to this day, you make good friends, and you learn and you grow.
In terms of the challenges you face now as a tribal chairwoman, and you've been doing this about 7 years. I mean, you were elected, and you're in your
reelected.
And reelected. There've got to be so many challenges with the budgetary issues. You've got $300 million budget, as I remember. Am I remembering correctly? Yeah. Housing, health issues with all the services. What are sort of the most challenging and problematical issues that you face kind of on a weekly, daily basis?
I'm not sure many folks really understand the hats that end up being worn in tribal leadership. I manage 2,200 employees. The chairwoman, the chair position is elected, but by virtue of that position, I'm not only head of the government, I'm head of the corporate enterprises as well, of which we have 7 or 8
list
corporate.
Those, Karen, because
we have the Black Bear Casino Resort, of course, and then Fond Duluth and downtown Duluth. But we have 3 commercial radio stations, a propane company, a gas station convenience store, a construction company, a sand and gravel operation, and a timber and logging company.
So to be on top of all of those businesses.
Yeah, and I would love to tell you that it gives me a whole lot to do, but we have good managers, and we have executive directors who help us, and then we have the whole governmental side as well. Everything from a K-12 school, a Head Start, a police department, a planning division, public works, natural resources management, a clinic. So with that many employees, obviously we have an awful lot of hierarchy and really good, talented, committed folks for doing good work in Indian country, whether it's service delivery or in running our corporate enterprises. So, I'm much like the captain of a ship. You kind of work with others to set the course, and then you steer along the way. I think in terms of challenges, we're a small community. We're a tribe of about 4,400 tribal members. About half of them live on or near the reservation. So being representative to those that are close by and those who are not.
And
then
those who are not, Karen, where do they live? I mean,
all over
in
the country.
All over the country.
All over the country.
Okay, not
because of
just
those government
surrounding.
relocation programs that I spoke about.
Okay, of course.
They've made homes and built community, all across the country. But they're still a part of our community, and I still represent them. And their needs are vastly different.
Still voting members in terms
Very
of
much so.
decision making that goes on?
Sure,
Okay.
sure. We want to hear from them. And especially when you talk about managing our financial resources, obviously, even those tribal members who are not at home understand the investments we make in the home community, whether that's building community centers or service delivery, making up for budget cuts and investing in those programs so that we keep capacity. They understand that. But they also still have a vision of where they'd like to see the tribal government put their attention short and long term. So, being able to communicate with them, whether it's by social media, through our newspaper, our various Facebook pages and website, hopefully to stream our public radio station before too long. So being the balance between making sure we're meeting our constituents' needs, our employees' needs, and really looking out long term about how we invest in our community. There's a lot of immediate needs, and that balance between making sure your resources are going to be there in the long term is an important struggle these days.
Would you say that, putting your finger on that piece of it, is that the most challenging part?
Very
sort of
much
balancing
so. Very
the
much
immediate
so.
with the long term?
I think that there's a misperception of folks who are not aware of Indian country, that casinos made us all unlimitedly wealthy, and that we have no more needs left. Well, in reality, I still have a 150-person waiting list for housing, and my federal grant only gives us enough resources to build 6 new houses a year. So, we have to be real entrepreneurial about how we leverage our federal money and try to seek other sources and do different models of housing that are fundable. So I think managing people's perceptions about what the needs are in Indian country when they don't really understand that gaming is not enough, that we manage a budget just like any other governmental entity, and gaming's really a surrogate tax base, not really a method to achieve unlimited wealth. Certainly not for a rural casino or one in out state that really doesn't have the population base to draw from, and with the large land base and a larger population.
And am I understanding correctly, there is a tension between dividing the profit among all the people versus investing in hospitals and schools?
We don't struggle so much with that. We do a small per capita payment at Fond du Lac. It's $400 a month per tribal member. It's certainly not enough to get rich on, but it might be enough to have a reliable vehicle, acquire larger housing to support your family. It's about 20 miles from one corner of the reservation to the main population center and employment center. So we're a big land base, and making sure people can fully participate in activities and employment, high heating bills, increased cost of living. So it's really an anti-poverty measure rather than a wealth creation. And our community has been very supportive about every investment we've made in our community. And since the inception of gaming, Fond du Lac has invested over $500 million in infrastructure and improvements on the reservation. Community centers, acquiring property, building roads, building schools. So we've been real smart with our resources, and those are very supported by our community.
Is that something you feel your leadership has helped steer to have that good outcome?
I don't know that my leadership is done with that one yet, especially as sequestration comes into effect. Indian country has been enormously impacted, I would say almost disproportionately, with sequestration. And I think those conversations in our communities about what our priorities are and where our main investment needs to be are going to be ongoing over the next certainly 5 years, if not longer.
Well, I'm sure there are so many other myths besides the myth of the casino, making folks rich. But one question that I've wondered about, you got your education, you came back. Do some of the kids who get their education never come back? Is there some percentage break you have on that? And is there a sense of obligation to come back for kids?
Remarkably, the answer to your question is yes. One of the things that our community has invested in isn't just on physical things, it's in our social capital as well. And any tribal member who wishes to attend a training program or school that's accredited is eligible for a pretty decent amount of financial assistance, for certainly enough to pay for a public school education and make a decent dent if you are lucky enough to be able to go to a private institution or one that's...
And you're talking college.
College, yeah. 2-year, we have the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College, which is of course right down the street, and any number of institutions of higher ed. And we'll support any of our band members no matter where they are. Many of them want to come back. Many of them are our community members. Last year we actually graduated the highest number of postgraduate students in our history. And I would say probably 90% of them want to come home and provide leadership in their community if they're not here already.
That's very, very
and
high.
And for the ones who aren't, that's okay too. Because having a successful tribal member is about having them be happy. And living the kind of life they want. And if that's still with their family where they are, in a home community that is not on the reservation, that's a good outcome too.
Well, that's the neat way to view it. What do you think are the qualities, Karen, that have made you successful? 11 years at the Duluth Y, your work now as chairwoman. What things do you think inside you make it work so well?
I think that I've been fortunate to be in a position throughout my career where I have been able to be representational. So whether it was at the Duluth YWCA and working on women's issues and issues for women of color, for poor women, for those are people that normally don't get to be at the table. And I was fortunate enough to be at many of these tables where decisions were being made or initiatives were being hatched, so to speak. But many times I was probably the only one at the table who had the perspective of being there in the first person and being able to say, well, I know you think that, but here's the reality of it. And it's a big responsibility, but it's also a great opportunity. And that's what diversity is supposed to be about, is bringing those perspectives to the table, because when solutions are homegrown and they're created by the ones that they will affect, by and large, they're going to be more successful. So I don't know if it's necessarily anything I did that made them more successful, but I was able to inform the process in a way that made, perhaps the decision making a little bit more realistic for those it would affect. And, I'm grateful for that opportunity. And now being an elected leader for Fond du Lac, and an administrative leader, so to speak, I have all of those experiences that I've had as a manager and an administrator, a policymaker, and now they have formed the tribal work back. So it's a bit like coming full circle, and I still get to be representational, whether it's informing Congress of issues in Indian country, or participating in rural economic development groups or other types of activities. It's still putting a face to people who aren't normally at the table.
Have you felt that people have listened in the way that you would hope they would have to your voice, which does represent?
Oh, not always.
No.
Not always. Sometimes we like the idea of diversity more than we like the actual inclusion. And there will be
Or you bring things up that would
are
be
uncomfortable.
hard to maybe make to change.
Very much so. Certainly, I am very much driven by the ideas of social justice. Informed by my own personal empathy. So, it's a mission, not just work. And, that's where the tenacity of my mother comes in a bit handy.
That grit.
Well, and I also am not going to allow a person to check off a diversity box. If you're going to invite me to your table, then you have to be prepared to actually follow through on that, or else I just won't participate. And I'll find another way to get it done.
I have to be sure that we talk a little bit about yours at Harvard, because we all look at Harvard with, kind of a wow look. What was it like for you going out there and again out there? Did you feel you were listened to as a woman in that Kennedy School of Management?
The Kennedy School is it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, and much like I try to create opportunities for other, I was given this wonderful opportunity with the support of the Bush Foundation's Leadership Fellows program, and I actually was somewhat interested in my undergrad in looking at that, but being a young mom, that really wasn't something that was possible. So after my daughter was growing up, and by then I had been married and acquired a stepson, I thought I would try that after the kids were growing up. And so my husband supported me going out there and said that he didn't want to go because he was worried that I'd be more worried about him and the kids back home and my parents. So he said, I'll hold down the home front and you go and make the most of it. And so I tried to. I went to every speaker series I could find out about, special events, whether it was at Harvard or Tufts or MIT. I got to hear some just national thought leaders talking about, current affairs and national affairs. And it was enriching. One of the benefits that I didn't anticipate was getting to spend time with a lot of the students who are a part of all of Harvard's colleges who make up the Harvard University Native American program. So I was with young, bright Native American students who were there, all of them younger than I, of course. So I got to be a bit of a mentor and a little bit of a mom while I was there.
Big sister,
fulfill
at least,
that, yeah, that nurturing kind of instinct. But it gave me such hope about the future of Indian country to see so much intellect and commitment to learn and be the best that they could be, and already talking about what they were going to do when they go home. And so that was a sense of renewal that I didn't expect and was very much welcome.
What years were you there?
I was there in 2002 and 2003 and received a master's in public administration.
Did your folks, have they lived to see these great successes?
They got to go to graduation.
Oh, that must have just been so exciting
it was
for
pretty
all
nifty.
of you.
It was pretty nifty.
Oh, wonderful. When you look ahead, we just have a few minutes left. Do you envision yourself staying in the role you're in as chairwoman if continued to be elected? Do you have other goals? What kind
that's
of
an
looms
interesting
ahead?
question because I've always had a 10-year plan, and now with elected office, it's in 4-year increments. So I have 3 more years now. I haven't really thought about whether or not I'll run for re-election. It'll be 9.5 years at that time. So I haven't really made up my mind, but I'm open to interesting ideas and opportunities, I think, but it will be something in public service.
When you think of balancing your life, your personal life, you told me you just took a vacation, which was a way to balance, with your husband and your daughter and all this, demanding work. How do you do it, Karen?
Well, you have to have somewhat of a thick skin and a proper perspective. I serve as the chairwoman of the Fond du Lac Band, and that's what I do. I think it's important to distinguish between what you do and who you are. Although what I do is informed by who I am. I really don't let it to be my identity. So being a wife, being a mother, being a daughter, being an auntie, those things are important to me. And those were really the motivation for my work in the beginning, was to take care of my family. And it would certainly be a poor way to repay their support of me through the years, to not give them the time and attention and to fulfill my responsibilities as a family member.
So you've really worked to balance the two sides.
And that's actually something that's pretty easy in Indian country, to tell you the truth, because we are very family friendly. We're a family friendly workforce, a workplace, and we certainly understand that there are things more important than your job. And people don't work because they want to work. They work because they want to take care of their families. And allowing them that balance removes a lot of worry that they would have, and allows them to be more productive, and makes them believe you care about them as a person, not just as an employee. And so I think that opportunity for balance is more appreciated and culturally appropriate in Indian country, and not as much of a struggle.
Hearing this, this is a wonderful example of some cultural differences here. I have an idea for your next role in life. You could go around the country talking about how to balance and the importance of taking care of yourself and your family and working. Well, we've got just a quick moment to have you look at a website that we're going to put on the screen. If you want more information about Karen's work, you can go to www.fdlrez.com. It's a wonderful website. It just explains a lot about what you are responsible for and with. And thank you so much, Karen. I'm getting the wind-up signal, but it's been great having you on.
Thank you very much for having
Appreciate
me.
you coming down.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being with us. We'll be back again next week. Until then, have a good week.